It. Hi, everybody. This is Judy with Africa Trade Link, and I want to introduce our guest, Mr. Orinda. And can you please introduce yourself and give us a short bio of who you are?
Jambo viewers from Africa. My name is Eddy Orinda. I'm a practicing attorney within the Republic of Kenya. I also practice in Ukraine, where I was trained for several years, and where I've also recently concluded my Doctor of Philosophy in International Law. Other than active practice of commercial law, I teach at the university, both in Ukraine and in Nairobi at the United States International University Business School. And for the last 10 years or so, I have been heavily involved in commercial litigation and corporate practice, where my work has largely involved international commercial arbitration between Nairobi and Rwanda, advisory and support services to the governments of the Republic of Kenya and Ukraine, and then the business community of Ukraine that has developed a lot of interest within the East African region. And in that respect, in fact, we have had to open a satellite office in Odessa in the south of Ukraine, where we also have two partners working with us under the name and style of China Law Center. Okay. And we've also recently ventured into China in partnership with the Beijing Allied Law Office. It's a major law practice in China, because the Chinese have developed a lot of business interest in East Africa, and therefore support that is tailor-made to the needs of the Chinese business community then became necessary. In Nairobi, we are known as One & Associates Limited Liability Partnership, and that's the name and style under which I practice law. The team in Nairobi is not large, and precisely for the very reason that we chose to be a boutique law firm, offering specialized commercial law services and advisory support on litigation and arbitration, which in fact, for purposes of this interview, I think will be of a lot of interest to Kenyans in diaspora and foreigners in general. Particularly because in a largely globalized world and a rapidly expanding and dynamic business community, you need to have very good legal support in order to be able to navigate around risks and liabilities that are associated with running of business. So the most important job that I do as a commercial lawyer is to assist people reduce their risks and costs by almost 85%. And the philosophy behind that is that there's a very deliberate connection between the decision to start a business and risks that exist within the business environment. Whether you want to look at it from a tax perspective, or whether you want to look at it from a litigation, arbitration perspective, because you had oversights and now you have to spend a lot of resources addressing issues that would have perhaps been best addressed in a contract that incorporates your interests as a businessman, and thereby reducing those risks. So largely what we do is to assist clients avoid litigation and arbitration in the first place. Because most of the time it is thought that arbitration and mediation are cheap, but it depends on the nature of the dispute. And if it's a commercial dispute, sometimes, in fact, it's more expensive than it would be in the commercial courts. You'd have to, for instance, pay an arbitrator up to $300 an hour for a dispute that may run for months on end. And therefore, in the long run, it beats the whole purpose of running a business, because the purpose of a business is to maximize on profits and to make business sense. So the moment a business is exposed to legal liabilities and damages, it means that business then spends a lot of its resources addressing issues that, in fact, would have been dealt with at the contractual or negotiation stage. And this is precisely what we do in order to support clients and Kenyans in the diaspora. And so, of course, at the foundation of this is the fact that the reputation we've built means people have to rely on us. And we recognize that that's a very huge responsibility, particularly for members of the public and Kenyans in diaspora that are far away, but nonetheless would like to have reliable legal services offered to them.
Absolutely. I think that is one of the things that we Kenyans, and not only Kenyans, if you want to do business in Africa, a lot of people get afraid because they don't have representatives, or they don't know of a representative who can advise them from the beginning. Now, Africa, this is what I say all the time. I know we have been doing business in a different way, but it's important that we do business in the right way. For us to be competitive internationally, for us to be competitive locally, it's important that we incorporate services like your services, because as you said, to mitigate a lot of liability later on, you have to start the right way. If you start the wrong way, you are not going to make it. You know, mistakes that you would have made, the lawyer will be able to pick up and see the gaps and mitigate it so that your contracts are solid. Now, going into that, what services? I'm a Kenyan diasporian. I'm an American diasporian. Never been to Africa before, but I'm interested in doing business in Africa. I'm in UK, I'm in Dubai, I'm in China, I'm everywhere else. What services, you know, break it down in a layman's language, not in a legal way, like simple layman's language. What kind of services are you going to help them?
I think specifically, Judy, and thank you for raising that. I think it's a very fundamental concern that members in the diaspora have, particularly because of the distance and the challenges they face in starting and completing projects and meeting compliance requirements within the legal environments of whatever projects they intend to achieve. And I think specifically two areas that would be of interest are trade and investment in real estate. Yes. Trade because, as I said, in a highly globalized world that we live in today, there's a lot of import and export involved, whether you want to think of it between the US and Kenya or between the United Arab Emirates and Kenya, that has a fair share of legal requirements. And one of the most important areas, for instance, you may need advice on is the international commercial terms. How do you mitigate on the risks and costs associated with the trade of export and import? Because sometimes you go for terms that place liability on you when ideally it should have been placed on the people you're doing business with. So if, for instance, you chose to do business on the terms of FOB, free on board, are you clear on what the tax issues are? Are you clear on the point at which liability passes? Are you clear on what your legal responsibilities are up until the time your goods are loaded on the ship to be transported to you? Are you clear that the moment they're loaded, for instance, you take full responsibility over them, so that if you do not have reliable advice on insurance and taxes and liability, then you might end up putting at risk a fairly huge investment, and that beats the whole purpose of trying to do business. So that would be one of the areas. And the Incoterms are dynamic. They're revised from time to time, so you may need to consider having proper legal advice before you consider export or import. The other area still on export and imports is decisions as to whether you would like to have a local entity in different jurisdictions. Is it necessary? If it is, what form should it take? Should it be a limited liability company? Should it be a limited liability partnership? Would you like to just have agents in those countries? How sure are you that you are covered legally in case you have to make claims? How do you have control over the point at which the investment passes? And are you able to secure it? What sort of tax advice do you need? Because the moment you're trading, you attract tax liabilities. How do you reduce those tax liabilities, for instance? Because the form of business you take, if you prefer one over the other, definitely has implications. How do you get into partnerships? Perhaps you're thinking of setting up a franchise. What requirements within the jurisdiction in which you would like to develop those partnerships exist? And are you talking to a commercial lawyer, or are you talking to a general practitioner? So that the need for specialized knowledge and support in the area would be very, very critical. So away from trading, which basically covers export and import that we've talked about, I think real estate investments is another major area that members in the diaspora are very, very keen on.
One of the things with real estate, jumping on the real estate, a lot of diasporans, we have been conned, we have been tricked, we have been done a lot of things. And including our relatives have done this. It may not be people we don't know. Some of it has been people we know. For example, people have bought land that has been bought by several other people. And then this land ends up in litigation forever, when, you lose your money. So a lot of diasporans have lost money like that. Those are areas that I know they will be very interested, because a lot of diasporans are looking into investing in real estate. And sometimes because of the setup in America, for example, the legal setup, they have an escrow company, and that kind of has an insurance to make sure if you buy through those, you're not conned. So can you talk more on how you can help the diasporans with the real estate investment? What aspects of it? Because I know that area is of great interest.
Let me start by saying this. Reputation is everything. So we guard it with our lives as a practice. And that's because there's a very, very huge responsibility placed on you as an attorney, particularly if people are relying on you who are not within the same jurisdiction as you are, and where they need legal support, assistance, and guidance, specifically intended to protect those investments. Because unless that relationship exists, then it is not very practical to for instance, get through a sale process successfully. So I think, in my view, it starts with a relationship, and that relationship has to be founded on a reputation that has been built over a period of time, and that means that foremost, people must be able to rely on that relationship. My advice usually on this kind of investments is that you have to do a lot of due diligence, because most of the time projects and real estate offers look very attractive when on paper. Most of them are offered at the foundational stages, so that you're making an investment in the hopes that in another couple of years, you have your apartment or you have your house, and you're relying on lawyers and land agents and everybody else in that chain to make sure that you have correct information regarding a search. So one of the first things you want to confirm is that the people you are engaging to do that search for you are people you can trust and are people you can develop a relationship with. Because if the search is done properly, reliably, it reduces your liability should problems arise. It means you can make claims against the government that issued the information that you relied on. But away from doing a search, you may as well have a reliable search, and you've confirmed that the people that are doing the projects indeed have authority to deal in them and to get into transactions with you. But then how do you secure your interest in as far as the agreements for these investments are concerned? And I think this is where you need very, very clearly guided legal advice. And you mentioned an escrow. That could be one of the possibilities that you may need to seek advice on, so that before completion, you're sure that the resources that you're investing are passing on to the right people, and that in return, you're getting all the documentation that you need in order to...
Because a lot of us Africans, and I think, all the contracts law, yes, it is more a white person's, a Muzungu kind of idea. But unfortunately, the Kenya legal system is run on a Muzungu contract, because a lot of people will buy land. Oh, so-and-so, the neighbor is selling this land. Oh, send money over here. Yes, we'll get it for you. And they don't write, they don't do anything. And that is how the problems begin, because legally, and you can advise people on that, legally, no real estate in America cannot go through unless you have a contract. And in Kenya, I'm sure it's the same principles. So diasporians, the thing of my mom knows this person, anajua huyu mutu, and therefore it is okay to just exchange without putting in a legal format, it is a big liability on your side. Can you expand more on that so people can get hold of you when they want to get these contracts down, so you can put them in a legal language that can protect their interests?
I think one of the things I'd like to disabuse at the earliest opportunity is that when your lawyers are handling a transaction on your behalf, you can take a back seat and not raise questions. And I think this is where most members of the diaspora have found themselves in fairly precarious conditions. The moment you issue instructions, the first thing that I think you have to be very clear on is the nature of those instructions, the scope of those instructions, and what exactly you need the lawyers to do. Sometimes you only need the lawyer to do an agreement for you. Sometimes you need them to guide you through the entire process because you're not clear about the laws of the local jurisdiction that you're investing in would require of you. Sometimes you just need them to review the agreements that you've already got into. And sometimes you only need them to check whether indeed the parties that are involved in the transaction that you've developed interest in are people you can rely on, and therefore help you develop safety measures in getting the transaction through and having it midwifed properly in your best interest. And I think this is where you must first ensure that that reputational value is attached to the relationship you're developing with attorneys, wherever they are. So it means you have to raise the questions that you need to raise from time to time. And this is something that remains a very, very huge responsibility that you cannot abrogate and say your lawyers are handling it, because most of the time you'll hear members of the diaspora raise a lot of complaints about lawyers that have swindled them.
Yes, yes. And I was gonna, thank you for bringing that up, because I was gonna say, what puts you separate from the other lawyers? Because some people have used lawyers and lawyers have swindled them, you know? And what do you, what is different about you that diasporians can trust you?
I think the consolation is that I've also been embroiled in situations in which I sought representation and almost regretted it. So I had to take my own cases back to prosecute them in the manner that I needed to, because I realized that the trust that I needed and I had placed on the specific attorneys I hired was elusive, and it put my investments at risk. So the first consolation I'd like members of the diaspora to have is that even lawyers get swindled, and therefore, if lawyers get swindled, it means someone who's not a legal practitioner has to take a lot more precaution. And I think some of the criteria that must then be listed in arriving at proper judgment on who to involve or not involve is first and foremost whether the lawyer you are hiring has the relevant experience in the area that you need that legal support, and whether or not the value of investments that they've handled is about the same that you intend to involve them in, or a lot more, because there's tendency to get better guidance where there's no excitement over the investment that you're making, and therefore the focus being on helping you midwife the transactions you'd like to get involved in. So if you do things in a hurry and you don't take your time to do due diligence, and you hire somebody who perhaps has handled a maximum of $2,000-3,000, then you certainly are setting yourself up for a lot of trouble. So I think one of the first things to check is that reputation, the kind of matters that the lawyer has handled, whether they're specifically specialized in commercial practice or whether they're general practitioners who have a fair command of the commercial practice. And secondly, looking for references, because there has to be somebody who will be able to tell you that they have had a transaction handled and they were able to rely on the attorneys that handled it, and they didn't have any complaints about the manner in which it was handled that put them at risk of losing those investments. So specifically, without appearing to blow my own trumpet, I think you may want...
we are Americans. We are used to blowing our own trumpets. So the diasporans, it is okay with us. Why? Because people say your word is your word. So it's okay to tell people, yes, I have the integrity. I'm honest, because, you know, that is the language we are used to. I know in Kenya, people like not to blow their trumpets, but I'm giving you the okay to blow your trumpet so people can really understand.
I handled transactions in excess of $5 million in and out of the country successfully, and closed them in favor of the clients. I've done very major landmark litigations on banking and finance in Kenya. You can look them up online. I think one of the criteria would be to check the complexity of some of those transactions. And it is true that some of them did not need to end up in court or arbitration, but they did. And therefore there was need for a very well-calculated approach in assisting the clients while helping them save the little resources that they have to secure their investments, get them the results that they need. So as I said, in our practice, reputation is everything. I mean, we guard it with our whole lives.
Okay, I'll go back, and this is for real estate. So, and I'm not, the real estate, I think you've articulated what services you would do well. I'm gonna piggyback on the trade, on the trade. One of the issues the diasporans have, a lot of people have tried to import things to the country, and they get conned a lot by customs. And I don't think it's customs. I think it's the agents that work for customs. One, there's no transparency. So they may pay a certain fee, they lie about that fee. And what happens is you've put in a container of so many things you want to sell, A lot of people may not understand the import-export criteria. And by the time it reaches the port, there's so much thievery that goes on that people lose their investments. I had this video, I saw this white guy, one who was trying to import the big rigs to drill water. And they were doing a lot of donation work, and the people at customs were asking them from an arm and a leg. So those kind of people, what kind of help would you give them under your firm so that we can mitigate those disappointments and therefore increase trade among our own people as well as anybody else who wants to invest in Kenya? Because the smoother the process is, the more business. And we have so many young people unemployed, and we can actually solve those problems. The problem is the government, and it may not be the government, it may be the agents. Myself, I tried to bring in a container, and the agent I hired was trying to go up on a price, which was all false. Fortunately, I think being American, for me, I'm gutsy. So fortunately, I went to KRA and I went to ask them straight, why are you charging me this money and this is the thing? And the guy is like, no, we only charged you 200,000. What are you talking about? This guy was upping the amount to 1 million shillings to get the container out. So the commissioner actually was very good. And he called the agent and blasted the agent and said, tomorrow you need to release this container or your license is gone. What kind of advice, what kind of help can you help the diasporans? Because we are giving up. We are giving up doing business with our country. And I think we shouldn't give up. We need reliable contacts. We need reliable resources, people who are trustworthy, who can walk us. I have lived in America for more than 30 years. So although I'm a Kenyan, I may not really be up to date with the local, what do they call it? The local laws, the taxation, all that. So what kind of help can your law firm help the diasporans who want to engage in such activities?
I think, again, as I said earlier, I would like to go back to the focus on relationships and the fact that you have to invest a fair amount of your resources in reliable people that can then help you mitigate those risks and midwife the transactions that you're keen on successfully. But I'll be very, very straightforward on this. One of the most difficult things that I have experienced in my practice, because we have provided this kind of support, and indeed I speak for a lot of other good attorneys in this respect. We have supported a lot of clients from Eastern Europe, for instance, without them having to be here physically, and they have arrived and concluded contracts successfully and picked up with their businesses without complaining about having been defrauded or swindled. And that is because they appreciate the value of investing in due diligence. And a lot of times, people would rather go straight into the transactions without, for instance, investing in consultations from reliable attorneys. And reliable attorneys will charge you a decent fee in order to be able to do that. So one of the biggest problems is looking for cheap. And therefore, in the wilderness. And it can be a lot costly finding your cost back, and sometimes you don't, and that's quite unfortunate.
And I think what happens with cheap, if you don't get the right consultation and the right, once in a while you get through, and then the next time you come around, then everything is so tight, and then whatever you thought you had made, you lose it double or 3 times more.
That's true, and you also need to focus on attorneys that have a lot at stake. Attorneys whose reputations precede anything else, so that misguiding clients on one transaction would mean that your entire practice and its reputation is at stake. And for reliable attorneys, that is certainly not worth it. So I think, again, you have to take time in getting the correct references and developing a relationship moving forward. Because a lot of times you'll realize that the support you need doesn't necessarily require legal knowledge. It may require the reputation of the attorneys that you're dealing with to just get things moving with the tax authorities,
Correct.
or moving with the government, or get things moving within the business community. And there's a value to that reputation, so that if you're dealing with specific attorneys, then that cuts your inconveniences by up to 60, 70%. Yet they're not necessarily legal issues. But the advantage of having a lawyer involved is that while you're getting the support that you need and you can rely on, and dealing with people that are recommended by people you can rely on, you are able to, along the way, you also get proper legal advice every step of the way, because most of the time you'll realize you'll spend, say, $200 to avoid losing a lot more, because you have proper advice indicating that you do not need to move through with that transaction. However, most of the time when you overlook that, you put the resources at risk. So again, in the world we live in today, I must say that the reputation of attorneys is highly questioned. And I'm one of those who've been very, very critical about the conduct of attorneys in supporting clients, whether locally or internationally. And I think still it doesn't change the fact that there are reliable attorneys out here that are able to support you through the projects or transactions that you would like to do. As I said, most of the time, it may not even involve the law, but because you have a reputation behind it, it tends to be guarded and midwifed properly, mostly to the best of your interest.
And that will, you know, taking into consideration that you don't live in the country, but you want to do business with Kenya, for instance. So understanding what is current, understanding what's happening, as you may say, it may not be necessarily hard law, writing a contract, but just getting that advice, having somebody to hold your hand through the process is worth engaging a good lawyer like Mr. Orinda. Now, we did real estate and trade. Is there any other thing you think diasporans would benefit from your services?
I think general legal advice and audit of your current engagements, because as a lot of times you get good legal advice at the beginning, but then it becomes obsolete midway because the policy frameworks change, the legislative environments are dynamic, and therefore by extension, the compliance requirements are imposed on you as a business or as an individual, then need a continuous audit centered around whether or not the policies that you have in your organization are able to respond to those requirements. So I think one of the other critical areas that we're keen on supporting members of the diaspora in is legal audit. You may as well have very good advice at the beginning, but moving forward, are you certain that that advice is still relevant to the circumstances of your business?
And legal audit can involve, like a lot of diasporans put money in circles, they put money in different organizations. A lot of people have been conned like that. And normally these people give a document that is haphazard, and they just really come to the diaspora and say, oh my God, if you put your money here, it's gonna multiply. And sometimes what I understand as legal audit, so if you have that kind of activity going on, sometimes you want your law firm to investigate the person, the counterpart in Kenya, and see, are they saying the truth? Like there is one that was started in Kakamega. I won't mention the name because it's under litigation. But this organization proposed that they were gonna start a hospital, like a cancer center.
Yes.
And a lot of diasporans put money in because they came. In fact, they were talking. I picked it up because they were talking in two languages. They were talking help nonprofit at the same time. They were talking this is an investment. So I know I asked one of the people, is this a donation or is this an investment? I say, you can talk both things in the same time. And of course, they thought they knew I was a smart ass, so they pushed me on the side, you know? Uh, so, you know, and I told people, I'm not putting my money here. Something is not right. And sure enough, people put a lot of money in, and that money is lost under litigation. Just to find out their names were nowhere on the contract. The two people in Kenya were the only ones whose name were and who held shares in the company. And them, they were like behind them. So they were invisible. They were not there. They cannot be represented rightfully in a court of law. Those kind of things, diasporans, I want you guys to engage Mr. Orinda to do audits for you. Because sometimes you may say, oh, he may charge this amount, but it's worth it. You would have saved your money if you did something like that than if you continue to do now, you have nothing. And then it's going to be in litigation for how long? Forever. And at the end of the day, the legal fees is going to eat up the money that has been, you know, is been left in the account. So those are some of the things that I want to impress on my people, that it's time. It's time we stop doing business jua kali. It is time in America we invest in such services. I don't know why it becomes very difficult for us to engage such services in our own country. And that is why we have been, you know, people do you in. So I think it is something that we need to look at. Anything else you want to add on it? Or how can people reach you, your contact, those kind of things?
I'm happy to provide our farm profiles, contact details on the WhatsApp group that already exists. And in fact, even more specific questions can be asked within that group, and we are happy to respond to each and every one of them. Our numbers are also available within that group. So if you get in touch with Judy, you should be able to get some guidance on how to access those contacts. And we are happy to read them and respond to them more specifically, should there be need for that.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to post this video, and we're going to put the WhatsApp group number, the group. Please join the group because it links your law firm directly. And if you come into the group, you have a general question you can ask. But specifically, if you have an issue that you need to consult with the law firm, get in touch with them on a one-on-one basis, and then tell them what the scenario of your question is, and then they'll be able to consult and pick it up with you there. So if you already have something specific, just contact them directly to schedule an appointment so you have the one-on-one consultation. If you're still general wondering or trying to figure out where you're coming or going, then join the group so that we can be able, they can be able to answer some of your general questions, at which point you should be able to engage them in the future. So on that note, we're gonna say good night. I know it's good night for Kenya. America is about 10:45. So yes, you guys are ahead of the game. So thank you so much. And diasporians, anybody who wants to do business in Africa, Africa is the next thing that is going to happen. And please, Africans in the diaspora, Black Americans, all the other Black people worldwide. Africa is your home. Let's not give it to the other people, as well as if you are any of the other people, you can be able to consult with this law firm so that you can get to mitigate a lot of arbitration later that could happen if you don't get proper legal advice. Thank you so much. And I'm so glad to.
Me, and I'm honored to have had the opportunity and platform to share my thoughts on the very pertinent questions that you've raised. And I think what I'd like to emphasize is how keen we are to develop a relationship that can then be the foundational basis for the reliance that you have expressed has become very, very elusive.
Correct.
So much so that that reputation has to be built on a relationship that we are keen to start with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay.